Hey guys, today I'm going to be painting Lilith from Limbo Eternal War. Now this is kind of in celebration of the fact that they're going to be shipping it soon and we shall be getting it probably within about a month-ish, so really excited to finally get this game. There's a lot of great sculpts in here, and Lilith was actually a voted on person, and you guys voted, and this is who you wanted to see, so I finally did it. Now I'm going to be doing something kind of interesting here. I'm actually going to be painting her in this red hue, and then the dragon kind of like a ribbon eel. So this is the ribbon eel with the bright blue and bright yellow. I wanted it to be really striking and just kind of a cool clash. So she's going to be a lot of red hues, and a lot of that is just because I want to do the skin just different than a normal Caucasian skin tone. So we'll get into all that. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, now first things first is I've assembled her as best as I can. You know, I'm not the best assembler or anything like that, but either way, I'm painting the 75mm version. Obviously, if you're following along and you didn't get that and you just got the game, you'll just have the normal version. The exact same miniature, I just have a little bit more room to work with, but the same rules should apply. When starting out all of these bases that look like this with Mechanicus Standard Gray, I've already also done Charlotte from Limbo Eternal War, so a link in the description below to that one if you're interested in that. She's the one that's like standing on her sword that's stabbing a demon head. Really, really cool sculpt. All these sculpts are really cool. And really just the detail level of these are really good. If you ever get a chance, if you ever see a miniature that really calls out to you and you can get a 75mm version of it and you haven't painted a miniature this big yet, I highly suggest it. It is a completely different feel. It feels like you are unlimited in what you can do. There's so much space. All the details are nice and crisp. They're really nice resin, and it's a whole different experience. Something I really enjoy as a painter, just being able to paint it and kind of having a display piece of this really cool mini. Anyway, so now I'm just throwing some Nuln oil on there. It's just a black wash, just to kind of get into those crevices and just kind of the texture of all the rock here, the kind of the stone slabs that are here. And we're going to do some other stuff to this much later in the video, so I'm going to do it a base, and then I'm going to put Lilith on it, and then I'm going to do a few more things at the very end of the video, so be on the lookout for that. We won't quite be done with this, but we're going to set it aside for a long while here very shortly. Now, while I'm doing this, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching and being here. As always, I really appreciate just hanging out with you guys. So be sure to just comment below and, you know, tell me how your day's going. I would love to hear it. With Christmas coming up here very shortly at the time of posting, I know the holidays can be a little stressful sometimes, so if you need a little pick-me-up or just want to discuss things, by all means. Here's Charlotte, by the way. Yeah, one of her blades actually broke off. She's resin this version, though. That's the 32mm scale that you'll do. I'm going to do the base just like that. They actually changed her swords. If you look at the newer version, they thickened the swords so that they won't break like that, which is really good. Now this is gray blue, and I'm doing a dry brush here actually, and I did that on Charlotte as well. And as you can see, I love how this looks. It gives it a very cool look to it, a very kind of almost like twilight nighttime kind of shading to it, which I really like. It just doesn't look plain gray. There's a little bit more to it. It'll also tie into this miniature well. I'm actually going to use this gray blue for the entire kind of bottom part of the snake here, the dragon thing, the lizard thing, whatever you want to call it. He's got like these fins below, and like I said, I'm going to do it really blue and then like these striking yellow fins. I think it looks really cool, and I normally paint fairly dark, and I wanted to kind of, when I get to these big miniatures, I really try to do new things. So I tried to paint much brighter than I normally do here. And again, I tried like the red skin tone. I'll talk more about that once I start on that. But really just trying to do something different and really think about the colors and choices I use. The art in Limbo Eternal War is all like sepia toned. There's no real color to it. It's just kind of a drawing, which means you can do whatever you want. By the way, when you're painting this, do not paint where it's actually going to touch the base. Ideally, when you're gluing it or when you're putting it on the base, you don't want it to be glued to paint. You want it to be glued to the miniature. So, just FYI there. Lothern Blue for the base coat of the blue. one of my favorite blues. I love Lothern Blue. I don't use it very often because it is such a bright blue. I've used it for kind of a base coat, the darkest portion of like electricity if somebody has like a Tesla coil out or something like that. If you add like white to this and really highlight it up, it looks really, really sweet as like lightning and stuff too. I've done that before on like a Rise of Moloch World of Smog miniature. One of the heroes there had that, and I really enjoyed when I did it there as well. But just a really good blue, and we're gonna shade it and do all that kind of stuff. Anyway, with the coloration, again, I have these cool colors, right? I have this blue snake, and so but then I had the yellow too, which is not a cool color. It's actually kind of a warm color, but a very bright color though, so it fits. So I wanted to do something different with your skin anyway. And so I figured, well, why not? Let's do a kind of a clash thing, so cool and warm. So, and she's part of like the evil team, sort of. And so why not like red, like a red hued skin? And then I thought that would be very striking and kind of almost make it seem like they're an unlikely pair, right? This kind of bright blue dragon and this, you know, kind of red lady. I'm gonna give her orange clothes and all sorts of stuff. Drakenhof Nightshade is just a blue wash. Just if you got a blue wash, throw it on there. It'll work. They're pretty standard. I haven't seen a lot of blue washes that vary a lot, but this is a fairly dark blue wash. If you do have maybe a light blue wash, I guess, I don't know. And this is again just to kind of get it in all those scales, pop out all that texture. We are going to highlight it, and do not worry, I'm not about to highlight every single one of these by hand. I don't hate myself enough for that. But this does take a while, and you do have to be cautious about not taking your time here, because if it starts to dry and then you paint over it or you get some more wash on it, you're going to get a tide mark or a brush mark where you see where your first brush stroke of it ended and your next one began, because you're going to have essentially two layers on top of each other. So when you're painting stuff that's brown or that's round and long like this, you just kind of have to spiral around it over and over again as you're kind of going through, and just make sure you keep playing with it. And this is where pots come in handy, and this is why I like pots for my washes, because I can quickly dip my brush in there and keep going, and not worry about running out. If I ran out, if God forbid I ran out in the middle of this, I would end up with a tide mark. It'd be kind of a bummer. So now I have Lothern Blue back out and my dry brush. I'm just kind of dry brushing it just to kind of give it a general highlight. And I'm not being too targeted when it comes to a light source yet. I'm giving it kind of a general highlight. You can see it adds a fake shine to it, right? It looks almost like it's shining in the light, which is kind of the whole point. And I'm being fairly, liberal with my application here, and just kind of giving it a basic shape. And then I'll go and then, give it a really, really strong, more targeted highlight in a bit. But I am, like, if I think it's going to be in shadow, I'm not worried about it at all. I'm just going to leave it like that. So, like, right underneath her back there is going to get a whole bunch. And make sure to get the head and stuff, too. Right now, you don't have to be too careful because you haven't painted a whole lot of it. So if you get a little bit of blue somewhere else, that's fine. It's whatever. For the bottom, I'm getting gray blue out again, and I'm doing some fairly strong highlights. So a lot of times you'll water it down and make it very thin and very light to kind of build up to it. But I wanted these to look, I guess, more wet and shiny, and I really wanted to pop out the texture of them. And so these heavy highlights, I think, do a good job of doing that. So I'm not worried about blending them in because I'm thinking of them almost more like light reflections more than anything. And then on the bottom, it doesn't really matter anyway. I'm just doing it just in case some shows up. I'll have it go there. But definitely on the tops here. And it also helps pop those ridges out, those kind of overhanging ridges a little bit more from the body, which again is, I think, something good with the wash darkening it so much. All right, next up we have white. This is not pure white. I'm not painting with white. You can see it on my brush. I added white to the Lothern Blue. So anytime I put on white, unless I specify, I'm adding it to the previous color or the color I mentioned or whatever. So this is now a brighter version of Lothern Blue. Now you can use stuff other than white to highlight. You can add yellow. You can add, you know, a tan. You can add all sorts of colors to brighten something and not get it just a whiter version of it. If you've ever like been in paint and you see the like square box, right, and you have kind of the hue and the saturation, right, this is changing the up and down value, right, the part from black to white of the same color. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. I very much wanted it to just be this Lothern Blue because I love it, but really getting some targeted highlights here. So, and again, I'm being fairly general here. I'm not being super picky about how it looks. It's just a general highlight. The more unnatural, I think, and less rigid it looks, the better, in my opinion. Now, swapping gears from all that blue, we have dark vermilion for the base coat of her hair. We're actually going to get this out a little bit later. Every now and then I don't plan my painting quite perfectly, and so I end up, you know, having to take a color out. I try to just move through colors and paint everything that needs to be that color within reason. Sometimes depth affects that as well, but painting this bright red, like right now, I'm like, you know, fire alarm in my head, worried. Because this is very red and that's very blue, and I don't think it matches at all. In the end, I think it looks really, really good, but for now, I'm pretty worried painting. And all I want to say about that is, as you're painting, you've had something in your head and you start and you're like, I don't know if I like this or not. Keep going with it. Try it a little bit and see if it ends up being good. So often with washes and highlights, it changes the color that you're actually painting with so much that often for a base color, it's not what I want. I don't want this red, but you'll see it when I'm done, and I think you'll note how much better it looks than when I first started. If I had just stopped right there and said, no, I'm not doing red hair anymore, I would have been kind of bummed because I really like how it turned out. As you saw, I added some white to that and did some general highlights, very light highlights. And now I'm doing some light orange. Now, when highlighting red, if you add white to it, you're going to get pink. If you add yellow, you're going to get orange. And so you gotta almost, it's very hard, I find, to highlight red because you either get orange hair or pink hair, and I don't want either. I want red hair. And so it's kind of difficult, and sometimes a wash will help, sometimes it won't. You just kind of have to play around with it. I will say I also challenge myself sometimes to not use washes all the time, and instead multiple highlights. I feel like a lot of times I have more control over how it looks at the end product. So now I've added some white to this light orange, so it's a fairly bright color, where it almost looks like a very mild orange now. Like because of how much white is there, it doesn't seem like it almost has a lot of color to it when it comes to, you know, the orange. And I'm adding these strokes, and I'm purposely not super watered down as much as you could be. And I have a bit more loaded on my brush as well. You can see the belly of the brush is a little full there, so I can get these nice strokes, and it doesn't like thin out or anything like that. Because I feel like with hair, I think that works pretty well. Now you can kind of already see it coming together, I hope. This is really where I thought, okay, this is going to work. This is exactly what I was kind of envisioning in my head. Not too pink, not too orange. I thought it turned out actually really cool. CADIAN FLESHTONE is going to be my base color. No, it is not super orangey. Yes, it is darker. And so that's kind of my point here. Again, you can add colors to highlight things. You'll see me do that in a bit, and it can shift the color. You'd be amazed if you're willing to try just how much you can play around with certain colors and how you can get colors to act in different ways just based off of what you layer into it or on top of it. And so that's pretty good. Now, here I am starting to be a bit more careful because that hair's done. I don't want to touch that hair again, and so I definitely don't want to have to touch it up, because if I get a big blob of CADIAN FLESHTONE on it, I'm going to have to do the base color again and then all those highlights in that one spot, and it's very hard to make that not look touched up. A lot of times you can kind of tell it's just difficult to blend in. So being a little careful when I need to be, but otherwise being fairly, you know, again, just going and paint over that armband. It's not worth playing around with and trying to, miss it or whatever. You'll just, fix it with the rest of your paint. Now, one thing to note, especially when painting females that are dressed like this, is there's a lot of very large areas of smooth skin, and skin can be difficult. I know people freak out about painting skin, but what I find for it to make it believable is just to add color to it and more colors. Don't just make it look so flat. And I'm no expert. I'm not saying that. I am average after all. But that and just smooth highlights. Just take your time and do multiple highlights so that it doesn't look super rigid or anything like that. Now you'll notice I added some light orange into this. So to highlight this, to lighten it up, I've actually added some light orange. Now again, I want her a little bit darker skinned, a little bit more tanned, but also kind of red hued. And so why not add some light orange into that? It's going to highlight it up. It's going to make it a little bit more orangey. You can even tell in her arm now, and it just looks a little bit more into the red spectrum, which is exactly what I wanted. That just kind of warm colors. I think in the end it turns out quite well. This is definitely the most tanned lady I've ever painted, and I enjoyed the challenge. I thought it turned out quite well. I was happy with the results because when you first go into something, you might have an idea, and you might not know how to implement that idea, right? I didn't Google how to paint a tanned lady, and I probably did it a worse way than some other person does. I'm sure people do great jobs, but I was happy with it. I thought it turned out really well. Again, with these highlights, you can tell how watered down this is. What you're seeing now is brighter than it will be, just because when you first paint it, it's wet, so it's reflecting any light you have, and so it looks brighter. It's useful for, you can see on like her knee how smooth that is now compared to when I first painted on. It looked maybe a little stark, but that was because of the light reflecting on it. But you just kind of have to be careful, and I don't really understand how light works per se, but I think I can fake it well enough to get just some slight muscle definition in there, and some just kind of really highlighting those shapes and making those kind of stand out. Now, I will say that I spent longer on this portion of the miniature than any other part, just because, again, it's so many different layers, and I'm not even showing you all of them. I'm skipping around and adding some and keep going, and a lot of times I'll find that to add another level of highlight, don't swap the color, just add a second layer to it. So I'm still using that light orange highlighted CADIAN FLESHTONE, but instead I'm adding multiple layers to it, which makes it less opaque, and so you can't see through it as much, and so it just becomes a little bit brighter. That's a very good way I've found, especially for skin, to highlight it. Okay, so now I'm going through it one more time, and this time I am adding a bit of white to it. So this is definitely highlighting it up, just kind of making sure that where the light would reflect towards the top of anything that's shown. It'll definitely help with the facial features, which are all there. It's a great sculpt in that regard. She has a very cool expression. And I don't mean that color wise. I mean that as in, like, she's very serene about it. She's not like super excited about anything right now. She's just kind of petting her dragon, just, doing what she does. But you can see those kind of higher level highlights on the structure of the arm. Just helps pop it out a little bit. Very subtle. Again, I'm not trying to do anything extreme contrasty here. I think the more natural it looks, the better. And so, if I look down at my arm right now, it's not like there's some crazy highlight going on it, at least that I can tell. And you can see, like, right there, it looks bad, right? When you first put it on, because it's reflecting that light, it's a little bit brighter. Additionally, as long as you don't reload your brush, you can keep kind of feathering it out and spread it around and just kind of make it work for you. As long as you take your time, I think you can get some pretty great results with very minimal effort or skill involved. Speaking of time, this is a little bit of a longer video, and that's just heavily edited down. I spent hours on this miniature. You get whatever time you put into a miniature, you get back in quality. The biggest difference between a professional painter and a non-professional painter is not the brush they use. It's not any art classes they took in college or anything like that. The biggest thing is time investment. A professional person that's really trying to, like, win an award or go into a competition or whatever is spending hours and hours and hours on a mini. And more often than not, we're painting board game pieces, and so we're not going to spend hours and hours and hours on one mini. And so you just kind of have to judge how much time investment you want versus quality. But that's really the trade-off there. That's what it is. So now here I've added a little bit more of a straight orange, but still heavily watered down. And this is, again, just to add a little bit of tint to those highlights while keeping it still nice and bright. And as you can tell, I very fine tip, very light touches, just kind of, again, adding a little bit more. But this is, again, definitely a highlight. It's just a making sure that that white highlight is still kind of orange. What this does is, and I'll do this sometimes, well, I'll do kind of a heavier highlight that doesn't blend as well. And then what I'll do is I'll add kind of a very thin down glaze color that kind of just melts it all together. You can even use a wash for that. Sometimes I'll do all of my highlights and then add a wash at the very end. And what that wash does is it kind of mutes the transitions and just kind of helps it kind of blend in a bit more. So again, continuing to work on these highlights, making that knee pop out, making that leg pop out, the chest, the facial features, the arm that's outstretched, the top of her legs, all of that, just to kind of, again, build that up, make it that kind of red hue I want, and make those highlights pop. Alright, finally we're moving to that bright yellow. This is fun. This is Flash Gets Yellow. This is a fun word too. That's a Citadel yellow. You could probably use something from Army Paint or something like that. Like maybe a Babe Blonde would be close to this, I'm not sure. But just whatever kind of crazy bright neon yellow you got, throw it on there if you're wanting to do the ribbon eel thing like I am. I really love how this came out. It's such a striking miniature because of this. It's a very kind of bold statement. And I don't know, I really dig it. I think it's not something you would expect to see. I think a lot of people would, just do this a normal green, or maybe even a kind of an earth tone lizard or something. I'm not sure what people are doing with it, but the moment I saw the fins, right, like on the head there, I thought ribbon eel, and I actually knew what those were just because I think they always look cool. They're super bright and just kind of cool looking. So I've also kind of tied it in. She has like these fins on her, like this, like it's not attached to anything, like it's almost coming out of her. She has it on her face too. You saw me paint that. So like right by her cheeks where her ears would be, she has these kind of fins too. So I figured let's paint those yellow too. Let's kind of bring them together a little bit. And again, the yellow is actually, not a cool color, and so it kind of works with that warm skin tone a little bit, and you can see kind of how contrasty it is to the blue there. They definitely pop out. Okay, for our first highlight, I got Moon Dust. This is from Army Painter. I actually really like this highlight for yellow. I think it's a very good transition color, just to right before you get to that crazy highlight on the yellow where it's much closer to white. This is a very good one. It's kind of a very muted tan, kind of a bright tan color, almost closer to ivory, I feel, than maybe a normal yellow, but I really like it. Now, the transition to her skin to those fins, you saw kind of dappled, just kind of a little bit of lines there. I kind of wanted to add a little bit of texture to it, a little bit like it's just coming out of her skin, for whatever reason. I don't even know what they are, but they're there, so I painted them. Now, a lot of times I feel painting is really like painting by numbers. Here, it's just anywhere there's a ridge, I'm adding some highlight to it. There's a lot of people that would have like there's a light source coming from behind her, or from right in front of her, or from a 45-degree. I don't know about any of that junk. I kind of generally do a general kind of daylight highlight, like a SUNZ out there, highlighting pretty much everything front and top. And so like these ridges here, to really make them pop and you get that texture in there, just add that moon dust, just trace them, easy as pie. All right, next up we have Dark Vermilion out again. Yeah, like I said, sometimes I don't do them quite in the same order. This is for like her lips here, just so that you can see those pop too. Once you add her eyes, her eyebrows, which we're gonna do Dark Vermilion as well, because hey, the same hair color. Once we get the eyes in there and a little bit of makeup, I think it adds a whole lot to it. And if you notice, I haven't used a wash except on the blue. I didn't use a wash for the yellow. I didn't use a wash for her skin. I didn't do a flesh wash, any of that. I just manually highlighted it up. It takes longer, but I think it's a much smoother, much more controlled way of doing it. Now, I apologize somewhat for the kind of blurriness here. I have filmed these better since, and this is actually an older video that I never got around to editing and releasing to you guys, so I'm happy to do it here. But I did have the autofocus on, so it really likes to focus on my hand a lot of times. Tanned flesh plus flesh wash in the mouth. It's a very good kind of muscly look to it. It just has just enough red in that tanned flesh to look good. Now, I'm using ivory for the eyes, and here's why. A lot of people, you got like these bug eyes on your miniatures, and that's because you're just using pure white. Rarely in nature is anything pure white, and so you get kind of this ghostly look if you use a pure white. So you want to use it something close to white, like an off-white. Now I have white gray, which is a great color from Vallejo. But again, because she's so dark-skinned, I felt that would still pop out a lot. And also, because she's, you know, kind of this red-hued person, ivory has just a little bit of like a tan in it, or I don't know what you would call it, a little bit of like a yellow-orange tint to it, but it's still quite white. So ivory was my go-to eye color there. I think it turned out great. Now, moldy clothes I didn't show you because I couldn't get it on camera well, but her irises are this moldy green, and then she has, I thought it'd be cool for her to have the same eyes as the snake. Like they're like super connected. I like how she's like caressing his head. I feel like they have a good connection there. So exact same color eyes, and then with this black, and this is, I think, the big difference on a lot of these miniatures is doing the eyelashes, right? When you have a miniature this big, you can actually do these fairly well, and they get bigger than this. She's actually kind of small for a 75mm because the snake's so big. Slit on the eye for the snake. And then just the upper ridge of her eye, like she has eyelashes there, really helps, I think. Now here I've taken the tanned flesh, add a little bit of white, so it's a pretty stark contrast, mainly because I want those kind of parts where the fangs come out just to really pop and maybe look a little bit menacing. He does have his mouth open after all. And we're actually moving right along. This is going a lot quicker than I felt it did, a lot quicker than I edited, that's for sure. So now I have light orange out here. And I'm just kind of painting her bodice, her kind of, I don't know, I want to say onesie, but that's not what it is. I don't know what they're called. Whatever her clothing is here, just getting that base color down. Again, I wanted her to be kind of, you know, head to toe, kind of these red hued stuff. So, you know, she's going to have this orange suit on as well, and this flowing cape. I really like how that looks. Just because it gives you ample room to highlight it, so it'll look good too. But again, take your time. You just spent so long on this skin. The last thing you want to do is get a big blob of light orange smack onto one of her legs or something like that. So take your time, you know, just kind of work at it. And, you know, I'm using a small brush here. I'm actually using a Winsor & Newton. I don't actually like those too much, but for now it worked in this one. They just don't keep their tip for very long, I find, with how I paint anyway. Maybe I'm too rough on them, but again, take your time. You should be good. The main thing to paint other than this now are her horns and her wings, and so we're on the home stretch here. And I'm also getting her shoes the same color. I feel like she would probably try to match those. Alright, next up we have Lava Orange, which is a darker orange, a more red orange. I'm doing this on the trim. So she has kind of these raised portion, these kind of designed, you know, kind of protrusions. I'm calling them a trim. I don't know what they actually are. But I'm painting those in this kind of darker color. And I just felt like that would really add to the texture and really make you be able to see it from a distance. So you don't have to be super close to the miniature to see these kind of fancy designs that she has on here. But again, you're gonna want to take your time. I mean, this is very fine, detailed work here. And then her armbands have those fins as well. Again, even I don't show you the one underneath the head because I can never get a camera angle over there, but she has one on her other arm too. You have to do. Now here on the shoes, I wanted to give it a little bit of a textured look to her shoes. I didn't want them to be like they look super smooth, so I just kind of dabbed the orange there. Don't be afraid to let your paint add texture that's not there. By all means, you can do all sorts of stuff and give it all sorts of different material looks just with brush strokes. Okay, so now I've added white to that light orange, and I'm painting in between that, again, just where the light would reflect. So mostly on her chest and then around her waist, and then on like the armband too and stuff. But otherwise, that's pretty much just it. Not a whole lot of work here. Oh, and of course on the feet. Now, I commented on how well this highlights up. I love these long flowing, capes and just kind of anything draping over something like this because they have these nice rippled effects that are really cool. Okay, now she is evil, and so I wanted her to have black horns. Well, not black horns, but dark horns. So these kind of black-red. It's a super cool color. I love deep reds like this. A very kind of devil horn color if I've ever seen one, as far as I'm concerned. I really like it. And so while she might have this nice flowing hair and this cool dragon, she's actually bad, and so she has that. And then dark red is like a kind of a pink version of black red. Very good to highlight those ridges on the horn to give it that texture. Alright, time for that last big piece, and that is the wings. Now, starting out Elfic Flesh, I already talked to you guys about how you don't want to just use pure white, hardly ever. If you can highlight, first of all, you can't highlight white. So if you start at white, then what are you going to do, right? You got to highlight up to white. So even if you want something white, the shadows are going to be less than white. And putting any kind of wash on white is a gamble unto itself on if it's just going to look dirty or not. You can use blues, typically that makes it look a little bit cleaner. You can use like a watered down flesh wash, that tends to work pretty well. Or again, you could just highlight up to white like I'm doing here. So I did a big brush, and then close to her hair I actually got my tiny brush out, and again, I'm very careful. Okay, next up I have Ivory out for a dry brush. This is a very heavy dry brush. You'll notice Ivory is a little bit lighter, but not a whole lot. Again, you're seeing it kind of in some extreme lighting conditions here as I film myself paint, but yeah, this is just general highlight. Alright, and now I actually have white out, but this is going to be a lighter dry brush. It's going to be a little bit more targeted, and there's barely any on my brush. This is just kind of getting that highlight up to white, right? So they look like white wings without being these bright, kind of obnoxious white wings. Now, fun fact, I debated and tossed and turned about whether to paint her wings black, like a black gray, kind of like what you see in like Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII, if you've seen that, like the one-winged angel kind of thing, or white, like because she's evil. I wanted her to have black wings, but at the same time, I wanted to do something you're going to see me do here in a little bit that would again tie even her wings into kind of this red kind of shape. And with these wings, I wanted her to be maybe kind of fallen angelish. So she's got devil horns, but then wings. So why not do both? She has a kind of a choker necklace thing here, so I just put some shining silver around that, and she has a gemstone that we're about to paint up afterwards, but again, just be careful. She also has a clasp on her back I don't show, but I painted that as well. So for the pendant, the gem that's set in there, Evil Sun Scarlet, look at that red. A bright freaking red. I love that red. It's again, Flash Goods Yellow and Evil Sun Scarlet are they're bright colors, and I really enjoy them. This is just showing how I attach this. So again, you won't have to do this on your game piece, but for me, that's just paperclip. All I did was kind of drill in some little holes and cut a paperclip and fit it in there. works good. Armageddon dust on here, so now we're back onto the base here, and what I'm doing is just kind of changing it up a little bit, making it not so clean. So there's kind of patches of dirt and dust that have kind of come at different places. Additionally, you can use a texture paint to help glue down something. You can also help it to gap fill. So if there's a gap under the tail you don't like, put some textured paint underneath it, and guess what? You just filled it up. But otherwise, I'm just getting blotches of this, just kind of adding some texture, some variety, some interest to it. You saw I added some leaves to the one with Charlotte. I'm not adding leaves to this one, but the same style. They would fit together side by side just fine if they were the same scale. Alright, now we have Agrax Earthshade. That's just going to be, this is after it dried, by the way, so I did wait a while. Ideally you do that and then paint something so while it's drying, so you're not just sitting there waiting or have to wait a day. But this is just, Citadel's brown wash, dark brown wash, and I'm laying it down on there, pretty heavy. And notice I also try to, I'm painting over where I painted, and that little bit of brown will again just help transition between the gray, the kind of the blue-gray cool stone to this dirt here, and I really like doing that as kind of overwashing anytime I get a chance to do that. Okay, so like I said, we're going to do something with the wings. CASSANDORA in yellow, and I'm just doing this on the bottom half of the wings. These kind of the feathers change, right? So they have like these really ruffled feathers and these long feathers, and I wanted these kind of under feathers to be this kind of yellow hue. Now I'm going to tone it down, don't worry. This is just, there's only so much you can do with the wash. I don't think I watered it down, but either way, it's probably not going to be as blended as you want. Now I will say that, again, under these harsh conditions, the transition doesn't look quite as good, especially up close like this. I think it looks better in real life, but you can always work as long as you want on those transitions. Skeleton Bone dry brush. This is a very good dry brush. I like to dry brush once and have it be very stark, a very contrasted look to it. So this is a much brighter version of it, and then I just dry brush it, and again, I think it looks great. It looks very, very good, like these kind of just general dirt piles, just changing it up a little bit. Okay, we're almost done here. Now I have white out again, and I'm dry brushing over the feathers here. This is again just to tone it down a little bit and just kind of help it blend in so these don't look like yellow feathers. Just yellowish feathers is kind of the goal here. Alright, now next up I actually have a very wet light orange. This is very watered down. This is a glaze of light orange. Just adding a little bit of darkness to the bottom of the very tips of the feathers. Again, very watered down, very light, hardly anything. That's because there's one more step on them and then I'll be done with it. Alright, so lastly, I'm going to get CASSANDORA yellow out again, and then trace over just part of it, so I'm doing less and less. So this is not even all the light orange glaze, it's just kind of the very ends of the light orange glaze. Again, just getting those tips even darker, just to add a little bit more of a transition there. And again, you can do it as careful as you want, as much time as you want. And guys, that's her. That is the finished miniature. That is Lilith from Limbo Eternal War. I hope you enjoyed that one. I really enjoyed painting her. It was definitely a unique challenge, and I tried some new things, and I'm pretty happy with how they came out. What do you think? Do you think it came out well? Do you plan on painting her any different? Do you are you gonna leverage what I did? I would love to hear kind of how you guys consume a painting video like this, especially one where the concept art doesn't have color, so I can kind of do whatever the heck I want to do. It definitely adds a lot of variety to what you'll see painters do. But either way, I had a blast painting her, and I'm really happy to share it with you. Guys, it is the week of Christmas, at least as I'm posting this, so Merry Christmas, guys. I hope you have had a wonderful 2020 and a wonderful holiday time. If you can spend it with family playing games, do that. It's a great way just to bring families together and have a lot of fun, so I hope you do that. If nothing else, thanks for being here. Always enjoy chatting with you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Right before I go, I do want to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Without them, I would not be pushing out videos this often. They would not be the quality that they are. And so everything that you see on this channel is a large thanks to them. So thank you to my patrons. Thank you to you guys. And I'll talk to you soon.